You know what time it is. It's NHL trade deadline season time. And you know what probably is the best thing to do during NHL trade deadline season? It's probably to make these predictions and see which player is going from where to there. Oh, let's see. This top scorer for one team is going to suddenly find themselves in the depths of a good playoff team, and suddenly you'll find some gem as they're headed to free agency for the summer. It's the storylines that we're all used to. It's the storylines that we're come to know and love during transactions, because transactions is that's what it's all about, baby. But that's enough blabbering around. Let's get to it. Let's predict what is going to happen around the NHL, around the league. So I've come up with 15 players that are on the trade board that you'll see here. One's here. One might be right here, that I found would be interesting to kind of partner with the team. And of course, we won't be talking specifically about a trade package, because that's would take forever, but just see what there's a gel. There's a team need stuff. I have the answers for them. Start off with the big gun, the player that's kind of been on everyone's, the top half, at least the top 5, top 3 of every trade board. Brock Nelson, the Islanders center, playing pretty well, could be a very good second line center for most teams, most playoff teams, if they need a center, and there is a good share of them. But I found there's a team out there that just hit a really bad injury, has been desperately needing for some just solid player down the middle, and I'm talking about Minnesota Wild. There's no way to avoid it. Bill Guerin, obviously being the GM of Team Canada, Four Nations just ended, got to see Brock Nelson up close. The Wild just had Joel Eriksson Ek go down to an injury, probably out to 6 to 8 weeks, according to Michael Russo of The Athletic. And there's a desperate need. Marco Rossi is amazing. He's a great player, should be on their top line, but he can't do it all by himself. Suddenly you find your second line centers, Frederic Gaudreau, Ryan Hartman, Marat Kuznetsov might step up, but he's still too young and has only been playing on the fourth line forever. So the Wild desperately need just someone stable in the middle, and now is the time to kind of put your foot down and just be like, let's just buy at the deadline. Let's hope that Kaprizov is fine and is ready for the playoffs, and then really kind of make a statement in a central division that could probably see the Wild coming out of it if they have Kaprizov, Nelson, Rossi, like going there. You'll their next back. Matt Boldy has been doing this two-way force thing. The Wild could be really dangerous with Nelson. I think that's just a perfect fit. Continuing down the path of centermen that can help out teams. Now, Scott Laughton, of course, everyone loves him in Philadelphia. The team loves him. He basically has a pseudo no move clause. He'll get to say where he goes, and that's why I think it's just an easy one-to-one transition. Scott Laughton is a Toronto Maple Leaf. He solves a lot of their depth scoring issue of just being a good force in there. Like David Kampf can do it all. You don't want to see Pontus Holberg in Toronto for much longer. Max Domi can't do it, and Scott Laughton could do everything that those players can't and more, and just bring a good, just a good vibe to the locker room that we've come to know on the Flyers for so long. I think Scott Laughton in Toronto just makes more sense. Oakville boy, they get to have him for another year for cheap with the cap going up. It just makes so much sense, and I think Toronto has the pieces to just say, like, here you go. Here's like, for a non-rental, here's a first-round pick. Just take it and leave it, and then that's good to go. Now, staying in Philadelphia, there's another name that's been on a lot of trade boards. That's Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, with 2 more years on his contract, he might not eventually move. He has a decent price at $5.1 million cap hit. And again, the Flyers are asking for a lot. The Flyers are asking for at least a first-round pick to take a player away from them that has basically been cementing their top 4 for this whole season, unless he's been out with an injury. Now, where does Risto really fit? I think just a team that needs some solid foundation, not necessarily a stay-at-home guy, because he can rush up the ice with possession and distribute the puck fairly well for a player of his size. And I think he could really just gel in with what the Oilers have going on. There's already been rumors that Edmonton's interested. He would fit perfectly next to Darnell Nurse, and just be a stable force so that Darnell can kind of explode a little bit. And I think he's been thinking a little too much during the season of being cautious of everything going around him. So I think Risto to Edmonton just makes so much sense. Again, their draft pick situation, their prospect situation isn't all that great, But I think the Flyers would more than happy take the 2026 pick and then just see how it goes from there. Now, the next player I want to talk about, staying kind of in the depths of a lineup, is Brayden Tanev, the known guy to provide that stable. Again, it's so much about stability and depth scoring in the playoffs. So I think Brayden Tanev could really do that. And I think a team like the Capitals kind of could use a player like Tanev on their third or fourth line wings and just, again, like shore up that just like bottom depth scoring. And he brings something that not a lot of the players have, and that he could just kind of guide that young core that they're suddenly building. And I think Washington is in a position that they don't necessarily want to buy, obviously, because this is kind of an icing on the cake season. Ovechkin is going to break the record possibly later this season. No one really expected them to make the playoffs, and suddenly they're the NHL's top team. So, but I think they still have to, with that mentality, Chris Patrick is going to be trying to reward his players. And I think a low-cost move of getting Brayden Tanev from Seattle is kind of an interesting and kind of just straightforward, here's your reward. You get Ryan Leonard in the mix to be kind of a top 6 winger, and suddenly that team is looking pretty dangerous at forward. And then you have the Jacob Chychrun, Matt Roy, Rasmus Sandin still, John Carlson, of course, still there. That's suddenly a pretty good team. Moving on, the Pittsburgh Penguins are a disaster. And honestly, after their reign of terror that they have been going on, it's kind of just a little bit of karma. But aside from that, Rickard Rakell is on the block, and I think Kyle Dubas and his staff over there are trying to maneuver around and sell off some external pieces for future hope to not be kind of embarrassed as Crosby kind of finishes his career. Where I think Rakell kind of fits is a team that needs depth scoring, and again, you're getting a really good middle six winger. So I think the Winnipeg Jets is a decent option for him to go there. It just would elevate that offense for so long, and a player that needs a little bit more support to score. And if the Jets were able to get a center, and later we'll touch on that later. If the Jets were able to get that, then they could kind of bring that offense to that next level and suddenly be really dangerous. I think Rakell is kind of it makes sense. It makes sense in Winnipeg. And now staying with the Jets, because I think that they should probably be active buyers and seeing a weak Central Division. Obviously, I just said Minnesota might be coming out of it, but seeing a weak Central Division and obviously having Connor Hellebuyck, you just have to go for it every single year. So I think that it makes more than enough sense to them get another player. I think that's Casey Mittelstadt from the Colorado Avalanche. Obviously, we've all heard about it, how Mittelstadt doesn't really fit there. The Avs are kind of shopping him a little bit. But I think for that option, without Laughton, because Laughton has been rumored to the Jets as well, without Laughton, I think Mittelstadt brings more offense that the Jets kind of have. They already have Adam Lowry. Nemestikov can do a little bit of that, but I think Mittelstadt's a better overall player than Nemestikov. And there's possibly an option for him to stay there. Of course, the Jets want to keep guys for a little bit longer. And I think if they buy and try to sell these players like Rakell and Mittelstadt on staying in Winnipeg longer term, maybe taking a little bit of pay cut, they could potentially replace some players coming out, like a Nick Ehlers that's a UFA. Could Rakell replace him exactly? No, of course not. Nick Ehlers is a special player. But I think you could get some of that from keeping Rakell around, and possibly for half the price Ehlers is going to get in free agency. Now, this is where a little bit of a bold take and a little spice comes in the video. So I'm sorry, that was probably really loud. Seth Jones has been wanting out of Chicago, apparently, and he doesn't really fit in there. And Chicago is probably just like, I don't know what to do with you, man. It's a team that's bereft of talent, and Seth Jones is probably their most talented blue liner. So suddenly you take that out of the equation, and they're probably going to be sinking even more. And Connor Bedard is just hanging out there. So, anyways, that's another story that we don't really care about. But I think Seth Jones is probably going to get traded this deadline. It makes so much sense, and I think a team would be wanting to take his $9.5 million salary, have the Blackhawks retain a little bit, and suddenly it's a little bit more palatable, especially under the new cap ceiling that's raising to over $100 million in a couple seasons. I think Seth Jones is a pretty good second pairing right-handed guy that brings a lot and probably wouldn't cost too much because you're spending a lot on the cap against him. And I think a team, this might be a little crazy, but I think a team like Florida makes a lot of sense. They generally take these guys that are not thought about, the Oliver Ekman-Larssons, the Gustav Forslings, and just make them offensive dynamos. Brandon Montour wasn't all that good in Anaheim. He was kind of a one trick pony, and then suddenly in Buffalo and whatever, and it finds a good situation in Florida, and then he excels and wins a Stanley Cup. So I think Seth Jones kind of could fit that mold, maybe to a higher ceiling than Montour did. And Aaron Ekblad being a UFA, it is a balancing act. And of course, we don't know the numbers of what Ekblad's ask is or anything like that. But if you're saying Ekblad costs $8 million, but you could get Seth Jones for $7 million and already signed to a contract, and maybe on a shorter term that would happen, then maybe that's the better option for Florida as they try to win their second Stanley Cup in a row. Now, here's where we kind of get into the dredges of the deadline, the little maneuvers around. So Trent Frederic is a player that's probably going to be traded by the Bruins. I think out of every forward listed, and every forward on every trade board, he's probably the most likely to move, but he just doesn't hit that same high ceiling. He's a depth player. And I think a team that wants that depth piece, and I could definitely see wanting a player like Trent Frederic as they try to make the playoffs for the first time in a very long time, is the Detroit Red Wings. That fit just makes so much sense, obviously, with the acquisition to get Andrew Kopp, JC Compher. I think Frederic kind of fits into that mold for their middle six and possibly their fourth line. And I don't know what it would cost. I don't know if the Red Wings are willing to pay a second round pick for a player like Trent Frederic, probably a third, maybe a third and a fourth or something like that. Like, just send draft capital their way, because they already have the prospect coverage is very full. So do they need a couple more guys from Sweden instead of getting maybe a little bit of a run? It's a balancing act, but I think Detroit kind of wants to take that next step, and I think Frederic is a very safe, like, low ceiling option. One name that's pretty interesting around the trade deadline right now is Ryan Strome. Obviously, the Anaheim Ducks are a disaster. It is a terrible situation over there in Southern California, but Ryan Strome, I think, still has something. Let me look at his numbers because I'm not fucking paying attention to Anaheim. Yeah, Ryan Strome has 8 goals, 31 points, 57 games. That's a decent depth center, and considering that he still has a little bit of a term on his deal, I think it could be a pretty good bet on a team that wants to compete. And I think a team that needs a center, just anyone to play other than Nathan MacKinnon, and obviously I'm talking about the Colorado Avalanche. I think Ryan Strome to the Avalanche just makes a whole lot of sense. Casey Mittelstadt out, Strome in, a little bit more veteran presence, possibly, and for the same price. I think their contracts are basically similar. Suddenly you get Strome making a impact on Colorado higher than he was able to on Long Island or in Anaheim on a very good team. And then I think his ceiling could get kind of elevated, obviously playing with just better players, and Colorado just kind of needs that. And I think they're willing to part with the assets for that. I don't think I really need to say much more than Mario Ferraro to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it just feels like a Leafs move. Get a depth defenseman, maybe overpay slightly, but because he's cheap, because he's decent, and because he can hit, I think the Leafs are just gonna really try to get him. I don't think I need to explain it much more. I think it's just a classic Leafs move. Best Connor Timmins, and then you just put Mario Ferraro in there just because. I don't even know I don't even want to look up the contract or any of the numbers. I think that's just an easy guess. This is a fun one. Obviously, we know Brayden Schenn is on the market. Basically, St. Louis Blues are shipping their captain out most likely. And now where would he go? Where is a team that can keep him around because he's under contract for a little bit and is known for taking these veteran players and just turning them into something else and revitalizing their career because they just have a system going on? Might not be the first team that comes to mind, but I think the Vegas Golden Knights just makes so much sense. They've already done it with Brandon Saad and got him so super cheap. I think Schenn reuniting with Saad, his former Blues teammate, just makes again, I'm saying it so much more, but it just makes so much sense. It's a team that I could see valuing a player like Schenn a little bit on the slower side, maybe twilight of his career, finishing it out. But there's a player there and a match there that I think just would make it perfect and would make Vegas even so much more dangerous after when Jack Eichel's not on the ice. Moving on, one of the players that have been a hot commodity apparently for some depth, some solid defensive play, pending UFA. I thought he was much younger than he is. 28 years old, Jake Evans out of the Montreal Canadiens. I think he should go to a team that kind of values a little bit of youth, has a little bit of runway in front of them, that it makes it work with a little bit of depth beyond their top players, and that is the New Jersey Devils. I think the Devils want to make a big splash, but I don't know if they want to part with their prospects or part with any picks, because they're, I think, still in that mentality of let's still build for a long time. And I don't know if they're really going for it in a way that, other than like Timo Meier or like big splashes like that, I don't know if they're kind of getting on the edges. But I think Jake Evans is the kind of middle in between that, where you would be committing to a player potentially, because I think you'd probably want to stay there and keep him around and just set it and forget it about a fourth line, third line center that could do you good for a little bit later on. Kyle Palmieri has been around for a very long time. He's on the trade block probably for his 7th, 8th, 9th time in his career, but I think he could get moved to a team that just probably could value a little bit of depth scoring. Again, it's all about depth scoring in the playoffs. I've been repeating in this video, but it's just so important to get those third or fourth line players that could pot at a couple goals in the playoffs when your stars aren't on the ice. And Kyle Palmieri kind of fits that. And I think LA is a perfect destination to try to get over the Edmonton Connor McDavid sized hump that I think it would elevate them and elevate their offense. They have some of the best wingers in the NHL, Kevin Fiala, Andrew Kempe. We have Quentin Byfield kind of making his statement, trying to overcome a little bit of a slump. Anze Kopitar still around. Philip Deneau still solidifying the middle six. I think getting Palmieri on Deneau's wing or something like that would just make their offense a little bit more dangerous, and potentially you have a matchup of, your Deneau and Palmieri goes up against the depth players of Edmonton, because it's going to be Kings Oilers first round. We all know that. Suddenly there's a mismatch there, and then the Kings could have the upper hand in the offense. So this is kind of a will they, won't they situation with Brock Boeser and the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks are still banging on the playoff door. They're still trying to figure it out. Shipped out JT Miller, but I think Boeser moving on, I think trading Boeser would probably be more of a signifier that they're like, okay, the season's done. We're just trying to repile for next season, and then let's kind of recoup, let's rest, and then just kind of get rolling in the summer. I think a sneaky team are the Tampa Bay Lightning. They kind of operate in the shadows a little bit. You're not seeing them linked to a lot of the big names, but they could end up winning the Atlantic Division, arguably one of the strongest division in the entire NHL. And then suddenly you're kind of seeing a core of Kucherov, Brayden Point, Anthony Cirelli kind of make that next step without Steven Stamkos and show that they're not fooling around anymore. And I think Brock Boeser going to Tampa would just it would just be insane. I think that offense would probably be the best in that. One of the best. Well, let's not say the best. One of the best in the channel in the NHL. If you just suddenly added a goal scorer like that to a team, like imagine that power play. Like suddenly you just have a dangerous set of 5 players that could overrun any penalty kill. And yeah, I think Tampa is poised to do something quiet but massive, and then suddenly you find them and they're just in the Eastern Conference final for some reason. Well, not for some reason, but they'd be there justifiably. Final player is a player that obviously had more hopes for where he is. It's Ryan O'Reilly in the Nashville Predators. Nashville is apparently very open for business. You could probably see them making a few more trades before March 7th, but Ryan O'Reilly probably wants more than to just be another draft lottery team and then see what Michael Misa looks like on that team suddenly next year and then get going again and hope to not embarrass themselves again. So I could see Ryan O'Reilly moved eventually for something at this deadline. He has 2 more seasons after this season's up. So that contract is still committing to him and he's getting up in age. But I think a team that wants to take the next step, because it's all about just kind of the process and what step they are in the rebuild. I think they should just like put their foot down and just be like, the season is not a write-off. The season means something. And that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think Ryan O'Reilly going to Columbus, you have Sean Monahan, Adam Fantilli, Ryan O'Reilly, Cole Sillinger. Some players can go on the wing. Ryan O'Reilly can go on Sillinger's wing, or Sillinger can go move to the wing or something like that. I think suddenly you just have a very dangerous forward core that not a lot of teams want to deal with. And they could probably make some noise in the playoffs. Suddenly you have a first-round matchup against Washington with the wild card. Does Washington really want to deal with a Ryan O'Reilly that's driven to prove something where he is? And then suddenly you have to deal with Adam Fantilli, Sean Monahan, all these players, Zach Werenski having a Norris-level season. It's a team that you want to believe in so hard. I think making that commitment would be that final step of just be like, this season matters, and we're just going to make it something and make it worthwhile. There we have it. 15 players on 15 brand new teams. Don't know what they'll be traded for. I'm probably going to get them all wrong, but let's find out March 7th. It's just days away, and we cannot be more excited for more transactions, because that is what it's all about. If you hate any of these pairings, like this video and comment down below, because you should probably say your opinion. I want to hear your opinion and where you want these players to go, and maybe throw in a different player, maybe throw in a new name. Maybe you want to see Trevor Zegras on your team and say, I'm going to put a package together for Trevor Zegras. Comment that. I want to hear from you. And of course, subscribe to Broad Street Hockey. Read broadstreethockey.com. We're always putting out content every day. There's just something always going on. Broad Street Hockey forever.